Each day, Wyoming small businesses generate many different types of hazardous wastes, from the neighborhood dry cleaner to the local print shop or the corner service station. The hazardous waste generated must be disposed of properly to protect our drinking water, food supply, and the air we breathe.
We generate about 300 gallons of waste a year.
Here at the newspaper, we produce about 2,000 pounds of hazardous waste a year.
500 pounds a month, 6,000 pounds annually.
As the owner or manager of a small business, it is important that you deal with hazardous waste safely and legally. This video will help you understand your obligations as a generator and how to minimize waste generation. We'll look at which wastes are hazardous and what you must do to comply with state and federal laws. We'll also provide some resources to help you reduce your waste generation and lighten your regulatory load. Many types of businesses generate hazardous waste, including vehicle service shops, printers, dry cleaners, mines, gas plants, construction companies, medical labs and hospitals, and agricultural operations, to name a few. Every business that produces hazardous waste or used oil is subject to periodic inspections by the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality Solid and Hazardous Waste Division, or DEQ. Failure to meet federal and state standards can endanger human health and the environment and result in penalties. So it is important to be aware of the type and amount of waste generated each month at your facility, along with the legal requirements. In this video, we'll discuss how your business is categorized as a hazardous waste generator, and we'll walk through the steps necessary to prepare for a trouble-free inspection. But first, it's essential to know exactly what a hazardous waste is. Every business produces waste, any solid, liquid, or contained gaseous material that must be recycled or disposed of in a landfill, by incineration, or other means is considered waste. Some waste, however, requires special handling because of its potential for harming our health or the environment. A waste is considered hazardous if it exhibits one or more of these characteristics. It is ignitable and catches fire with a flash point at or below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It is aqueous and corrodes metals, or it has a pH of 12.5 or greater, or less than 2. When mixed with water or under heater pressure, it is unstable and produces toxic gases or explosive reactions. Or it is harmful or fatal when ingested or absorbed, and cannot be disposed of on land because it can leach toxic substances into the soil, groundwater, or atmosphere. Hazardous wastes may also be listed, meaning they appear on one of 4 lists in Chapter 2 of the Wyoming Hazardous Waste Rules and Regulations. Wastes that contain halogenated solvents, lead or cadmium, and several other substances are harmful when not properly managed. Several types of waste are defined as universal hazardous wastes. These include batteries, banned, unneeded, or obsolete pesticides, mercury thermostats, and any lamp that contains mercury. If universal wastes are recycled and not disposed of, their handling does not require a state EPA ID number, and they are not counted as part of your total hazardous waste generated each month. Your business will fall into one of 3 different categories based on how much waste you produce. Businesses that produce less than 220 pounds of hazardous waste per month are called Conditionally Exempt Small Quantity Generators, or CESQGs. At this level, you need only meet 4 requirements, which we'll go through in a moment. Small quantity generators, or SQGs, are businesses that produce more than 220 pounds per month, but less than 2,200 pounds. Large quantity generators, or LQGs, are businesses that generate more than 2,200 pounds of hazardous waste per month. This video addresses CESQGs and SQGs, so if your business is an LQG, contact the DEQ for additional requirements. A checklist is available for CESQGs and SQGs from the DEQ's Solid and Hazardous Waste Division to help you make sure you haven't overlooked anything. Let's take a look at the specific requirements for CE-SQGs and SQGs. For businesses generating less than 220 pounds of hazardous waste per month, the requirements are fairly minimal. As a CE-SQG, you must be able to answer yes to each of the following questions. You need to determine if your waste is hazardous. If so, is it a characteristic or a listed hazardous waste? Do you inventory how much hazardous waste you generate each month? Accurate record keeping is essential in complying with your legal obligations, and it makes the inspection process easier too. It is important, in the event you should ever accumulate or store more than 2,200 pounds of hazardous waste, roughly 4 to 5 55-gallon drums, that you understand and follow the requirements for small quantity generators. To meet your requirements as a CE-SQG, the hazardous waste you generate must be managed at a federal or state permitted waste treatment or disposal facility. If you meet all of these requirements, you will have no trouble passing your inspection. Because of the larger quantities of waste involved, requirements for small quantity generators are somewhat more extensive than for the conditionally exempt. As an SQG, you must be able to answer yes to the following questions. You need to identify all the hazardous waste you generate and be able to explain how you determined each is hazardous. Adequate proof of your determination includes test results on waste samples or process knowledge including chemical and physical information from a Material Safety Data Sheet or MSDS. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, requires that an MSDS be provided by chemical manufacturers and distributors for all hazardous products. Be sure to evaluate all possible sources of hazardous waste, especially areas that can easily escape notice, like shop floor drains and sumps. Floor drains and sump wells are especially important because they frequently drain directly into the ground and can easily contaminate groundwater. All waste that enters these drains must be tested or otherwise identified for a successful inspection.
Well, what we have here is all of our drains are connected to a sand oil separator that's outside the building, and anything that goes in this drain goes through that, and then we've got oil absorbent socks in there that we change on a regular basis. Then it spills over to the other side and settles out any of the sand, and then it goes on to the city sewer.
Parts washers are another possible source of hazardous waste that must be considered. Many businesses use a solvent that is ignitable or becomes contaminated during use, and therefore must be classified as hazardous. Solvents also create unnecessary environmental and worker health liabilities for your shop. Washers that use a non-ignitable citrus-based solvent may produce hazardous waste if they fail the toxicity characteristic for trace metals or organics.
It became pretty obvious that that had to be a goal. It was costing us a lot to ship that waste off site. So we looked at, were there some solvents that we could just eliminate, and in some cases we did, like chlorinated solvents. And in the other areas, what could we do besides use solvent? And that's when we went to some of those automatic washing machines, look like a big dishwasher. We've got a washing machine here that's big enough to put an engine block in. And we also eliminated our hot tanks in that respect.
For any parts washer, your monthly amount of waste is computed from the number of times the unit is serviced, so you need to keep careful service records. Often, costs and liabilities may be minimized by replacing a material or process with another that produces less waste. Many businesses have switched to washers that use hot water to clean parts, helping reduce the amount of hazardous waste generated and the amount of labor required to operate them. However, aqueous parts washers produce a sludge which should be tested and, if hazardous, included in the monthly hazardous waste totals. Typically, waste aqueous solution with sludge requires disposal less than 3 times per year.
Well, our objective obviously was to reduce costs also, but I was really surprised when I ran the numbers that we've reduced our generation by 85%. I didn't realize that until somebody asked me that question. I went back and looked at where we were 6-7 years ago. And when you're in this business, it's getting to the point where there's only so many people that'll handle that waste, and their prices are going up. So it's our objective is to eliminate solvent altogether.
All SQGs and LQGs need an identification number assigned by the state DEQ. You can obtain an ID number by filling out and sending in an application form available from the DEQ. If you ship waste off-site, you need to properly fill out and use the Hazardous Waste Manifest. Manifest forms track waste from generation to disposal and are available from your transporter or waste management facility. Some of the items that must be filled out include the name of the transporter, the name of the designated facility, your state EPA ID number, and a description of the waste based on Department of Transportation or DOT requirements, such as shipping name and hazard class. Call the DOT for this information. Upon receipt of your waste, the TSDF should send you a copy of each shipment manifest, signed by both the TSDF administrator and the shipper. If you don't receive a copy of the manifest, you must file an exception report with the DEQ. Exception reports are important to establish that you completed your requirements in good faith. This can be a typed or even a handwritten note attached to the manifest explaining that the return copy was not received. All exception reports, manifests, and waste test results should be kept on file for at least 3 years. Tolling agreements allow a business to contract with recycling companies to reclaim hazardous waste and return it as a recycled product. Recycling saves resources and can be more cost-effective than disposal. Commonly recycled substances include spent parts washer solvents, antifreeze, oil, and waste inks. You must comply with the following requirements for tolling agreements. The agreement must describe waste type and shipment frequency, and require that the vehicle used to transport the waste be owned and operated by the recycling company. You must also keep a copy of the tolling agreement for at least 3 years after a contract has been terminated or has expired. Your inspector will check to make sure that hazardous waste is properly stored. To prevent hazardous waste from corroding the containers, all tanks or drums must be sturdy, leak-proof, and lined with material compatible with the wastes. Every storage container must be labeled with the words hazardous waste, along with the date the waste was first placed inside. In addition, prior to transportation, all storage tanks need to be labeled with the appropriate DOT information to ensure safe transport. If the nearest hazardous waste treatment, storage, or disposal facility is less than 200 miles away, you may store your waste for up to 180 days. If the nearest facility is farther than 200 miles away, you may store your waste for up to 270 days. Satellite accumulation areas allow you to store hazardous waste longer because you are not required to date your waste until it is moved to the primary storage area. However, no more than one 55-gallon drum of waste is allowed in any given satellite area. And, as with the main storage area, satellite containers must be clearly labeled with the words hazardous waste and any other applicable information, such as the type of waste. Satellite areas should be located close to the source of waste, and where the employee in charge of that area can maintain careful surveillance and control. These containers are intended for temporary collection only. Within 3 days of becoming full, they must be moved to the main storage area and the waste storage start date noted. By its very nature, hazardous waste poses a threat to everyone who works near it. All containers must be kept tightly sealed when not in use. You are required to inspect storage areas weekly to make sure the containers aren't leaking. Since the materials used to clean up leaks and spills also become hazardous waste, good housekeeping practices reduce the generation of more wastes, saving you money and helping prevent accidents. You are responsible for ensuring your containers are not deteriorating. Knowing which chemicals are incompatible with each other and keeping them separated is crucial in preventing explosions or toxic reactions. The MSDS is a good source of information about reactivity. You'll also want to be sure that you do not mix non-hazardous waste with hazardous waste. Practices such as putting non-hazardous cleaning agents in a container of used hazardous solvents unnecessarily increases the total amount of hazardous waste generated. Before hazardous wastes are disposed of on the land, they must meet the Land Disposal Restrictions, or LDR requirements. These identify waste restricted from land disposal and specify treatment requirements. Hazardous waste sent to landfills also requires an LDR notice containing your hazardous waste ID number, a wastewater, non-wastewater, and subcategory designation, the hazardous waste shipment manifest number, and waste analysis data when available. You are required to keep copies of your LDR notices for every shipment for at least 5 years. The agencies that may respond in case of an emergency should know your facility's layout, what kinds of hazardous waste you store, where they are located, and all approach and evacuation routes. Your floor layout should be arranged to allow unobstructed movement of people and equipment. In the event there is more than one police or fire department, you need to designate the primary authority. You should also have a similar agreement with any state emergency agencies that might be affected by a hazardous waste emergency at your facility. As with police and fire departments, local hospitals should know what kinds of hazardous wastes you generate. One person on your staff should be responsible for preparing and posting emergency response information and be able to direct employees and response personnel in an emergency. You must also be able to demonstrate that your emergency coordinator can perform these duties in the case of an actual fire, explosion, or spill event. The following information must be posted next to the phone where everyone knows its location: the name and number of your emergency coordinator and the primary responding fire department, the location of fire extinguishers, and spill control material. Fire extinguishers should be inspected and certified every 6 months. By properly completing this hazardous response form and keeping it at your facility, you will have addressed most of the preparedness and prevention requirements. Though waste handling and emergencies may play a relatively small part of your day-to-day operations, it is important that they are not ignored. The waste generator must ensure that employees are familiar with all proper handling and emergency response procedures. Sometimes local response is not enough. In the event of a fire, explosion, or other release of hazardous waste that threatens human health outside your business, or if you think a spill has reached surface water, you must report the emergency to the National Response Center at the number on your screen, as well as to the DEQ. To ensure the safety of your employees, your business must have an internal communication or alarm system capable of giving immediate emergency instructions to all workers at all times. If only one employee is on the premises, he or she must have immediate access to a cell phone or other handheld device for calling local police, fire department, or emergency response teams. Portable fire extinguishers and appropriate fire control devices, including foam, inert gas, or dry chemical extinguishers, spill control materials, and decon supplies must be available. You also need water at sufficient volume and pressure to supply all needed fire hoses, foam equipment, and auto sprinklers or spray systems. It's good to keep in mind that you can lower the risks of these kinds of incidents by implementing procedures to generate less hazardous wastes in the first place. Though SQG requirements are more extensive than for CE SQGs, they're really a matter of common sense and good record keeping. If you can answer yes to the questions we've just reviewed, you'll have nothing to worry about when inspection time comes. Now let's take a closer look at the special challenges for both CE SQGs and SQGs posed by used oil. Many kinds of businesses generate used oil in their day-to-day operations, and with millions of vehicles changing oil every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, it's inevitable that enormous quantities of used oil will be generated with the potential to do serious health and environmental damage if improperly disposed. Used oil includes any oil refined from crude oil or any synthetic oil that has been contaminated by physical or chemical impurities. These include common motor oil, along with a wide variety of other common lubricants. To help deal with this problem, the used oil management standards have been developed by the EPA and adopted as part of Wyoming's hazardous waste requirements. They apply to anyone who generates, transports, disposes of, or otherwise manages used oil, with a few exceptions. Household do-it-yourselfers, people who mix used oil with diesel for use in their own vehicles, farmers who generate less than 25 gallons per month from farm equipment, and any used oil which is disposed of by direct placement into crude oil or natural gas pipelines are exempt. To be in compliance, all other used oil generators need to address the following requirements when the inspector arrives. All containers for storing used oil must be clearly labeled with the words used oil. For vehicle service facilities with storage capacity greater than 2,000 gallons, including all tanks, drums, and other containers, a solid waste storage permit is required. The DEQ can send you a permit application form. SPCC stands for Spill Prevention Countermeasures and Control and applies to all used oil generators. Your plan must provide a strategy for dealing with spills from your large containers, including all needed containment materials. If your total used oil storage capacity is more than 1,320 gallons on site, or you have any container larger than 660 gallons, and your facility is located in an area that could be reasonably expected to discharge oil in navigable waters of the U.S., do you comply with all applicable SPCC requirements, including an approved plan to deal with spills and cleanup? And do you have adequate secondary containment? A copy of the plan must be kept on site. Contact the DEQ for more information on the SPCC requirements. Undrained oil filters can contain a quart or more of dirty oil, and many vehicles receive a new filter with every oil change.
We do about 70 oil changes a day, and it generates about 15,000 used oil filters to get rid of per year.
Oil filters need to be drained while hot and either crushed, mechanically dismantled, punctured with a screwdriver, or hot drained using any other method that ensures adequate removal of the used oil. Certain types of filters plated with a lead tin alloy called turn are themselves a hazardous waste that need to be counted as part of the monthly generation total, even after being thoroughly drained. Regardless of how you drain your filters, the DEQ and EPA recommend they be recycled. One method of managing used oil that can be both efficient and cost-effective is to heat your shop with it. Special heaters that burn used oil as a fuel can help turn a waste into a resource.
And we generate about 25,000 gallons of waste oil per year, and of that we burn about half of that in our waste oil furnaces.
We collect our used oil and then we burn it in heaters in the building. And it not only keeps us from having to pay somebody to haul that off, but it saves on our energy bill. In the wintertime around here, we can spend $11,000 a month on natural gas. So every time we can run that heater, we've got them running.
Used oil heaters can only be used to burn used oil that you generate yourself or is generated by do-it-yourselfers. Because of emissions concerns, used oil heaters may not exceed 500,000 BTUs per hour. Used oil heaters must have their combustion gases vented to the outside and meet all applicable safety codes. If oil heaters are not feasible in your shop, you should recycle your used oil. Ask your oil supplier if you do not know of any oil recyclers in your area, or contact the DEQ. As we have seen, every generator of hazardous waste has the opportunity to reduce the amount it generates at the source through a variety of practices. We call this pollution prevention, or P2. P2 makes good business sense because in decreasing the amount of hazardous waste you generate, you may also be able to change your generator status, lightening your regulatory burden.
Rising chemical costs, the rising costs for disposal, compliance with regulations, worker exposure and liability, customer expectations. These are all good reasons for following environmental best practices. EPA calls it pollution prevention. I call it good business practices.
P2 can also help reduce waste management and compliance costs, and in some cases strengthen your public image. And P2 measures are especially important for wastes with persistent, bioaccumulative, and/or toxic characteristics because these pose the greatest risks to human health and the environment. Nationally, EPA is placing an emphasis on reducing the generation of these chemicals. Information on P2 and whom to contact to help your business manage hazardous waste more effectively is available at the end of this presentation. Many businesses generate hazardous wastes, and though they pose risks to our health and the environment, they need not prevent efficient operations or profitable businesses. By far, the easiest and most cost-effective way of managing any waste is not to generate it in the first place. The inspectors who visit your business are interested in achieving the safest, most problem-free working environment possible, both for you and your workforce, and for the community where you live.